From Chris Leben taking a leak on an opponent's bed to Junie Browning's temper tantrums, TUF has seen its fair share of crazy. So here are the worst moments from The Ultimate Fighter, and you should brace yourself because this gets wild very fast. Because of course we have to start off with Chris Leben's accident on Jason Thacker's bed. Chris quickly embraced his role as the house rogue on TUF in 2005.
7 years, I've really shown the world that, that is not who I am anymore.
He became known as one of MMA's funniest fighters who had no boundaries. And Jason Thacker, aka Strange Brew, was just one of his many victims. After getting drunk, Leben decided to take a leak in Jason's bed.
A leak on his bed, I spritzed.
Oh, there it goes. Let's rub it in.
There's a difference. It's a little...
So, when he turned to his room to sleep, he had no idea he was going to spend the night soaked in urine. Thacker's time on TUF was never easy, and anyone could tell he wasn't cut out for that intense lifestyle. So, no one was surprised when he was kicked off the show. Years later, Leben went on Submission Radio to actually talk about the incident, not to mention the intense abuse Jason suffered when he returned to Canada. In his tell-all interview, he called out the Canadian fans for being over the top. He said that even though he'd peed on his bed, he'd never bullied him to the extent those fans did.
Not yet. July 21st, though.
Yeah, I suppose. Oh yeah, I guess it is coming up. Good job.
Which doesn't make up for his bad behavior. I mean, the least he can do is apologize for his actions, but Bobby Southworth took matters into his own hands in that same season. So when Dana White and the Fertitta brothers took the fighters out for drinks, Bobby decided this was the perfect chance to get revenge for Jason.
Martial arts. I've wanted to do martial arts since I saw my first Kung Fu movie.
And like every other drunken plan, things went south very quickly. But it's not like Chris Leben was completely innocent here. He just couldn't help but taunt middleweight young gun Diego Sanchez when he lost a fight. So Bobby decided to get involved, and the two got into a pretty nasty fight. Southworth explained Chris was making fun of Diego, and that's where they both had the face-off. He told him to back off and stop being so tough on the young fighter, which is when Chris told him to F off. As a result, I called him a fatherless beastard during their fight. He realized it wasn't his best moment, and a fan could have even forgiven him for it if he hadn't pulled another prank on Leben.
I put you down twice. Let's not lie. No, you was down in the first round. I knocked you down.
You didn't knock me down.
When Leben was napping in the backyard, Bobby and the other fighters thought it was the perfect opportunity to get him a little wet. The fighters decided to open a nearby hose and let it trickle down to where he was sleeping. Another contestant, Koscheck, was supposed to put the hose down when the water was turned on, but instead he shoved it in Chris's face. Bobby said he didn't think it would be a huge deal, but he realized how badly he messed up once he saw the reaction of the fans. And since we're on the topic of fighters messing up, we have to include the Upper Decker incident in season 6. Once Joe Scarola left the show in the 3rd episode, the 2007 show became a somewhat low-key season. That is, up until an outrageous yet kinda hilarious incident happened in the 11th episode. Team Sierra members were inside the house at the time, and Team Hughes was still in the gym, when 3 of the eliminated fighters decided to give their opponents a little going-away present. Richie Hightower, John War Machine Copenhagen, and Troy Mandelinez decided to poop into the tank of their toilet.
He ever really wants to get tough with me is when he's got the rest of his team around him and they're holding back, and you're
So when someone would go to flush, they'd get a not-so-pleasant surprise. The trio's laughter immediately irritated Starfighter Mac Danzig when Team Hughes returned to the house. But he was still better than most when they found out about the prank. On the other hand, Jared Rollins completely lost his mind. He destroyed the toilet tank's top and aggressively confronted Copenhagen, who then threw him onto a bed. Eventually, the house calmed down before things got too out of control, and Copenhagen even helped Mandelinez clean the toilet, which was, to put it lightly, an unpleasant task. Even though the incident was disgusting, it still ended up being one of the season's highlights. Who doesn't love a good fight on reality TV? TUF always delivers. The Backyard Brawl in Season 5 is the perfect example of that. TUF fights are usually meant to be inside the octagon, but Marlon Sims and Noah Thomas didn't get that memo when the two started fighting fighting in the house's backyard. Sims had apparently taunted Thomas because of his decision to tap out rather than pass out during their battle with Manny Gambarian, which was an insane comment to make either way because a Kimura doesn't cause you to pass out. It instead tears your arm and shoulder apart. But that didn't stop the bullying. Sims wanted to settle the argument with the fight right then, and fellow participant Alan Beiruba offered to referee the fight in the style of Big John McCarthy.
They believe that, this thing started with The Ultimate Fighter, and there's so many things that have gone on, and there's...
As Thomas delivered a wild sucker punch, the two started to wrestle. When Thomas tried to put Sims in an armbar, Sims dumped Thomas head first onto a concrete flower bed. Fans got to see some insane moves, but because the fight was happening on concrete, someone eventually separated them. Dana White came in the next day and dismissed all 3 of the participants. But honestly, if a backyard brawl was all it took to get someone kicked off from the show, then Junie Browning shouldn't have been allowed to get away with the things he did, because even years after season 8 premiered, no one can forget his wild antics on the show. It's no surprise that people started calling him the lunatic by the end of it because he acted like one. He'd randomly get into violent rages inside the house at the slightest provocation. The rest of the contestants always tried their best to avoid him, but of course, that didn't always work out, as Browning and teammate Shane Nelson decided to become very drunk in episode 4 of the season. Things spiraled out of control. Browning threw a glass at Kyle Kingsbury, cutting his arm, and then stalked the garden, threatening to bottle the other combatants. From there, it was just bizarre incident after bizarre incident. Once, Junie leaped over the cage to face the winner, Efrans Escudero, after his opponent submitted. He was looking for a fight, but thankfully, Coach Antonio stopped him before he could launch an assault. He even spat on Ronaldo Delgado's black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at one point and threw a glass at Shane Prim at another. Dana White was never able to justify why he kept him on the show, but it's clear that any publicity is good publicity for him. If only Dana had given the show's coaches the same amount of attention as he gave the contestants. Then we wouldn't have seen that horrible moment of Coach Quentin Jackson ignoring his fighter after the match. Because honestly, everyone hoped Rampage Jackson would stick to fighting after that terrible performance as a coach on TUF 7. When he returned in the 10th season, things hadn't changed at all. And at one point, when his team's fighter, D'Amico Rogers, fought, we got to see how bad of a coach he was. Because when Brendan Schaub finished Rogers off with an anaconda choke, Quentin walked away from the ring. The opposing team had to come in and console Rogers. It was a really low moment in the show's history. Well, there you have it. These were the worst moments in The Ultimate Fighter.